The Dak Attack is back.
Monkey D. Dragon and his revolutionary army have been lurking in the shadows since the first 100 chapters in the story. And while we know full well that their overall goal is to take down the celestial dragons, I'm going to use this video to explain what the revolutionary army has done behind the scenes to the various territories around the world that have made their goal a reality. And this whole theory stemmed from a discussion on Discord about this single page right here from chapter 440. Quick shout out to Tom for sharing this with me in the first place. On to the theory. In Post-Enni's lobby, we got confirmation that the Revolutionary Army had taken over two places. A new location named Centauria in the South Blue, and then somewhere in the North Blue that was cut off right before we got the name. And Oda obviously did this for a reason, and that's because it would spoil something. And I think I know what country that was, and it's somewhere that we've already heard of before this chapter even dropped. But in order for it all to make sense, I first have to cover some details of the Revolutionary Army itself and some of what they've already done up to this point as of chapter 1053. And as we all know, the Revolutionary Army is led by Monkey D. Dragon and his chief of staff, Sabo. And then under them, we have their 5 commanders, Ivankov, Karasu, Lindbergh, Belobetti, and Morley. But what many people forget about these 5 is that they represent different areas of the world, and they specifically command an army in each of these regions. Eva in the Grand Line, Karasu in the north, Lindbergh in the south, Belobetti in the east, and Morley in the west. And the only area that we still need represented is the New World. And I think that's Sabo's territory because of his actions in Dressrosa. He was there to investigate the weapons trade and the liquor iron ore, and given how strong the combatants are in the New World, I'm just going to say that this belongs to Sabo. And if the red line counted, that would be Kuma's territory, but I'm just going to leave that off for now. In addition to Centauria and the unnamed place in the North Blue, we also saw the Revolutionary Army take over part of the Lucia kingdom in the Grand Line in chapter 904, and this is not to be confused with the Elysia kingdom. We're going to cover that one later. But this now gives us 3 known territories in which the Revolutionary Army has taken over, and in order for everything else to connect, we very quickly have to speedrun the history of some lesser known islands in One Piece. First, I'll start with the Lucia Kingdom, which just 2 years ago was free and happy, and Ace actually stopped by here while looking for Blackbeard. But during the time skip, they fell under the world nobles, and they're now led by King Seki, who appeared at the most recent reverie. However, the Revolutionary Army freed that tiny port town that Ace visited just 2 days before the reverie started. And we even saw Moda take out Pinkbeard, and this is the girl who saved Ace from the river in the cover story. And then as for Centauria, this panel is unfortunately the only information we have, and we didn't see them at the reverie, and we have no confirmation if they're allied with the world government, and I think that this could possibly be just because they were liberated over 2 years ago now. And now we need to look at the North Blue to narrow down our options from Oda's teaser from chapter 440, and I started by looking at what characters were from the North Blue and where they were from, and there's quite a few big ones. First, we have Sanji from Germa and Law from Flavance, as well as X-Drake, Bellamy, Baby 5, and 2 world government affiliated islands named Duel and Whiteland. We don't know that much about either of these, but Whiteland is a play on Greenland, since Greenland ironically looks white, and since their king Iwatobi is always bundled up, I bet you that Whiteland is going to be all green and warm just to throw us off, which is a typical Oda joke. But the country in the North Blue that stood out the most to me was Loveneel, the island that Noland is from. And in order to make this connection, I really encourage you to watch this video from Parvision about Noland's past. Without it, I couldn't make the rest of the connections in this theory, so I'll go ahead and link it down below. But the overall point of his video was that Nolan was set up, and I'll go ahead and give a quick few examples as to the reasons why. When Nolan asked to make a return expedition to El Dorado, it took 5 years for the king of Loveneel, Aruyatan V, to get permission from Marijwa to lead that expedition back to El Dorado. However, Nolan couldn't even bring any of his own crew, which made that journey so much more dangerous. And then 1 year before they got permission, the Knockup Stream coincidentally sent El Dorado into the sky, so Nolan was ultimately made out to be a liar and executed. Books were then published making an example out of him so nobody else would try finding it. Due to that long wait, the propaganda, and then the odd timing of the Knockup Stream and them getting permission, it really seems that Nolan was set up. And if we assume that this is true, then it's likely that Loveneel and their king had a close relationship with the world government since they asked for permission. And oddly enough, Oda has yet to confirm their affiliation one way or the other.
No.
We know 30 of the 50 leaders at the most recent reverie, and none looked like or had names similar to Aruyatan V. And since he's the fifth, you would assume that that lineage would continue. That makes me think that they are no longer affiliated, making them an excellent candidate to be the North Blue country that was taken over by the Revolutionary Army. So if we go ahead and assume that Love Neal is right, then 3 of the 4 countries that the Revolutionary Army have interacted with were affiliated with the world government in some way, and that 4th one is just unknown. And they have also been in different areas of the world that they have commanders and armies attributed to. This makes me think that there's a strong chance they have made, or maybe will make, attacks on world government affiliated areas in the other regions of the world that we have yet to hear of, which would just be the West and the East Blues, which is also coincidentally where the sun rises and sets. And then this all leads me to a little known character named Thalassius Lucas, former king of Elysia, not to be confused with Lucia from earlier. Now we're on Elysia. During Dalton's flashback at the Reverie 8 years ago, we see Lucas stand up and proclaim that Dragon was going to be a menace 7-8 years from now, and this man was so right that he got dethroned from his kingdom and replaced with a man named Caesar. Now we have almost no details to this, but what we do know is the Elysia people cheered on Caesar heavily as he departed for the Reverie. And if Lucas warned everyone about Dragon, then he probably supported the current world noble regime because he was trying to protect it. This contrast makes me believe that the Revolutionary Army could have been the ones who dethroned Lucas because they gave Elysia a more benevolent leader in Caesar. That would make Elysia an excellent candidate for our country in the West Blue. And as you probably could have predicted, all we have left is the East Blue. And to me, there are 2 potential answers. The first is Goa Kingdom, which is where the Ace, Sabo, and Luffy trio grew up. And thanks to Stary, we know that they still have a seat at the Reverie and thus are still world government affiliated. Dragon is also from here and he's always looking east, so this just seems possible by default. But the one that I like a lot more is the Oikot Kingdom, which is where Nami was found by Belmir. And in case you didn't know, Oikot is just Tokyo spelled backwards, so I fully assume that this place is going to have an important role in the story at some point. And Belmir fought off pirates here 20 years ago, and if an island gets support from the world government, that means that they're likely paying the heavenly tribute, so I imagine that Oikot was world government affiliated as well. However, that was 20 years ago and we haven't heard anything about it since. Both of these kingdoms fit nicely as options for the East Blue, but I personally think it's Oikot because that would just be a lot more interesting, and Oda has kind of left it out of the story up until this point. And now that we have all of that information, the ultimate question that we still have left is why? Why are they choosing these specific places in each of the seas? And as we saw in Dressrosa, I think the answer might be kind of obvious. It's the world government's supply chain. By destroying their network and taking over world government affiliated countries in each of the seas, they're going to hurt the world government's ability to mount a response and defend themselves. And just like in many wars throughout history, they can also play the long game by limiting the amount of resources going into the world government, thus limiting the amount of soldiers, slaves, weapons, etc. that the world government will be able to have if a war were to occur. And just as we saw with Sabo in Dressrosa, when he was kind of investigating the area and finding out more about the weapons trade with the world government, I think the other commanders for each region were doing something similar. I think each one was tasked with investigating their region and the various world government affiliated countries within it, and finding the ones that have the closest ties to the world government and their supply chains, and finding the best way to take them out. And since Dressrosa was part of the weapons trade specifically for the world government, maybe these other parts of the world were for other resources, such as money, slaves, food, natural resources, or maybe even devil fruits. And if the Revolutionary Army can control these various parts of the world government's network, thus crippling their forces and limiting their ability to have a response, then that would make their attack on the Celestial Dragons just that much more feasible. Well, that's it for the video, guys. If you enjoyed it at all, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so I know you want me to keep making more videos just like this one. Peace, y'all.